Story 1. The Repeating Mile Marker. Marcus had been hauling freight across Interstate 80 for 17 years, and he prided himself on knowing every truck stop, every exit, and every peculiarity of the route between Omaha and Sacramento. On the night of October 14th, 2019, that confidence would be shattered in a way that still makes him check his odometer obsessively to this day. He left the Iowa 80 truck stop at 11:47 p.m., his logbook meticulously updated, his Kenworth W900 loaded with electronics bound for Reno. The night was clear, temperature sitting at a comfortable 58 degrees, and the CB radio chattered with the usual lonely voices of drivers pushing through the graveyard shift. Marcus adjusted his thermos of coffee in the cup holder and settled in for the long haul across Nebraska. Around 1:30 a.m., somewhere past mile marker 126, he noticed something odd. The highway seemed unusually empty. In 17 years, he'd never seen I-80 this deserted, not even at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday. The peculiarity registered as a small discomfort in the back of his mind, but he attributed it to chance. Maybe there was construction rerouting traffic. Maybe he just hit a lucky gap in the flow. Then he passed mile marker 154. He noted it specifically because it marked his usual halfway point to his next fuel stop in North Platte. He glanced at his odometer, 287,642 miles. He'd check it again at mile marker 160 to calculate his fuel consumption, a habit ingrained from years of trying to maximize efficiency. 6 minutes later, by his dashboard clock, he should have been approaching mile marker 160. Instead, his headlights illuminated mile marker 154 again. Marcus felt his chest tight. He checked his speedometer, 72 miles per hour, exactly what he'd been maintaining. He looked at his odometer, 287,648 miles. 6 miles traveled, but the same marker. He grabbed his CB radio. Breaker, breaker, this is long-haul Marcus. Anybody out there getting weird readings on I-80 westbound near mile 154? Static, pure, crackling static. Not the usual quiet of an empty channel, but an aggressive, almost angry static that made him wince and lower the volume. He drove on, watching carefully now. The road looked identical to how it had looked 6 minutes ago. The same slightly bent guardrail post appeared on his right. The same cluster of 3 reflector posts marked the left shoulder. Even the roadkill, a deer carcass he'd passed, appeared again in the exact same position. Mile marker 154 appeared again. His odometer read 287,654. 12 miles traveled. Same location. Marcus pulled over onto the shoulder, his hands trembling as he activated his hazard lights. This wasn't possible. He grabbed his phone to check GPS, but the screen showed no signal, not even a searching indicator, just a blank gray screen where the bars should be. His truck's navigation system displayed a blue dot on a white background. No map data loading, just that solitary dot hovering in digital emptiness. He stepped out of the cab and the silence hit him like a physical force. I-80 was never silent. There should have been wind noise, distant traffic, the hum of his own engine. Instead, the air hung dead and still, and even his diesel engine seemed muffled, as if he were hearing it through cotton wool. The highway stretched in both directions, perfectly straight, perfectly empty. The white dashed line seemed too bright, almost luminescent in his headlights. The sky above held stars, but they seemed fixed, not twinkling like someone had painted them on a dome. Marcus got back in his truck and keyed the ignition. The engine responded normally. He pulled back onto the highway and accelerated to 72 miles per hour, watching his odometer click forward. 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles. Mile marker 154. His breath came in short gasps now. He floored the accelerator, pushing the Kenworth to 85, then 90. The engine roared, the trailer swayed slightly, and he watched the odometer spin. 5 miles, 8 miles, 12 miles. Mile marker 154. He slammed the brakes and the truck shuddered to a stop directly beside the marker post. He stared at it, this simple green rectangle with white that had become his prison. In the red glow of his taillights, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. Below the 154 in much smaller letters were words. He grabbed his flashlight and climbed down. The words read, "Parallel maintenance in effect." Marcus had driven I-80 for 17 years and had never seen such a designation on a mile marker. Maintenance notices appeared on electronic signs, on orange construction warnings, but never on the markers themselves. The letters seemed wrong too, slightly irregular, as if hand-painted despite looking official. He climbed back in the cab and tried the CB again. This time, instead of static, he heard his own voice. "Breaker, breaker, this is long-haul Marcus. Anybody out there getting weird readings on I-80 westbound near mile 154? His own call from 20 minutes ago. But before he could process this, another voice responded, also his own. "Jesus Christ, is anyone there? I've been stuck at mile marker 154 for 6 hours. My odometer says I've driven 400 miles, but I'm still at the same goddamn spot." Then another Marcus, voice cracking with desperation. "Please, someone answer. I've been here for 3 days. My food is gone. The sun hasn't come up. Is this hell? Did I die?" The CB exploded with overlapping versions of his voice. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all begging for help, all trapped at mile marker 154, all sounding progressively more desperate and broken. Marcus ripped the CB handset from its cradle and threw it against the passenger window. He sat in the sudden silence, mind racing. Think. There had to be a pattern, a solution. He passed the marker going west each time. What if he went east? He checked his mirrors, saw nothing but empty highway behind him, and began a slow 3-point turn, maneuvering the long trailer around on the wide Nebraska interstate. Facing east now, he accelerated. His headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the same road he'd just traveled. 1 mile on the odometer, 2 miles. His heart hammered against his ribs. Mile marker 155 appeared. Then 156. Marcus sobbed with relief, tears streaming down his weathered face. He drove east, back toward Iowa, watching the markers count upward. 157, 158, 159. Whatever had trapped him was releasing its hold. At mile marker 167, the world seemed to take a breath. The stars began twinkling again. His CB radio crackled with normal chatter. His GPS returned, showing his exact location on I-80. A pair of headlights appeared in his westbound mirror, another truck passing on the opposite side of the highway. Marcus drove all the way back to the Iowa 80 truck stop, arrived at 6:43 a.m. according to his logbook, though his dashboard clock read 2:51 a.m. He parked, went inside, and ordered breakfast with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The waitress, a woman named Dolers who'd served him coffee 100 times, looked at his pale face and asked if he was all right. He wanted to tell her, wanted to explain what had happened, but what could he say that wouldn't sound insane? Instead, he asked her a question. Has anyone ever mentioned weird things happening around mile marker 154 on westbound I-80? Her expression changed, the friendly concern replaced by something harder, more knowing. She refilled his coffee without him asking and leaned in close. "Don't go back out there tonight," she said quietly. That stretch of road between mile marker 154 and 155, the state rebuilt it in 1987 over an old pioneer trail. They found 43 graves during excavation, unmarked, probably from the 1850s. The construction crew refused to finish the job, said their equipment kept malfunctioning, always at the same spot. State brought in a new crew, but here's the thing. The original mile marker 154 is still out there, buried under 6 feet of asphalt. The new one sits 200 yards west of where it should be. Marcus never drove that section of I-80 again. He reroutes south through Kansas now, adds 4 hours to his California runs, and doesn't care about the lost revenue. When other drivers ask why he avoids the straight shot through Nebraska, he tells them about road conditions, about construction, about anything except the truth. But sometimes, late at night at truck stops across the Midwest, he hears stories from other drivers. Stories about getting stuck in loops, about mile markers that repeat, about stretches of highway that trap you in moments of endless asphalt and painted lines. And he knows with absolute certainty that he's not the only one who found the repeating mile. His odometer now reads over 340,000 miles, but he knows that number is wrong. Somewhere in the 6 hours his logbook can't account for, he drove hundreds of miles through the same stretch of reality, looping through some maintenance corridor that exists parallel to our world. Sometimes wonders about the other versions of himself, the ones he heard on the CB radio, whether they're still trapped there, still circling mile marker 154, waiting for someone to tell them which direction leads home. Story 2. The Phantom Fuel Stop. Rebecca Torres had purchased her first rig, a 2015 Freightliner Cascadia, just 8 months before the incident on Highway 287 in Wyoming. After years of driving for other companies, she'd finally saved enough to become an owner-operator, taking on a regular route hauling agricultural equipment between Billings, Montana, and Laramie, Wyoming. The route paid well and kept her close to her daughter in Casper, where Rebecca stopped every trip to share dinner and check homework. On December 3, 2021, Rebecca left Billings at 10:15 p.m., running behind schedule due to a delayed loading dock. The late start meant she'd be pushing through the emptiest hours of night on Highway 287, a 2-lane road that cut through some of the most desolate territory in Wyoming. Winter was settling in, and though the roads were clear, the temperature hovered at 19 degrees, cold enough that stopping meant running the engine to keep warm. She planned to fuel up in Rawlins, a reliable stop roughly 3 hours south, but as she crossed into Wyoming and descended from the Montana plateau, she noticed her fuel gauge dropping faster than expected. The headwind had been brutal, pushing against her loaded trailer, forcing the engine to work harder. By the time she passed milepost 91, still 40 miles from Rawlins, the low fuel warning light illuminated her dashboard. Rebecca checked her trip computer, 38 miles of range remaining. She could make it, but it would be close. Too close for comfort on a December night on one of Wyoming's loneliest highways. She grabbed her phone to search for closer options, but the screen showed no service, not unusual in this part of the state. She keyed her CB radio. "This is Freight Mama. Anybody out there familiar with 287 southbound? Any fuel stops between mile 91 and Rawlins?" A crackle of static, then a male voice, distant but clear. "There's a place about 12 miles ahead on your right. Can't miss it. Big sign says Last Chance Fuel. Independent operation, cash only, but they're open all night." "Much obliged," Rebecca responded. "I don't remember seeing it on my last run." "New ownership," the voice replied. "Just opened last month. Good folks." The low light seemed to glow brighter as she drove, her eyes fixed on the darkness beyond her headlights, watching for the promised fuel stop. 12 miles passed on her odometer, then 15. At 17 miles, she was about to call back on the CB when her headlights caught something on the right shoulder. A sign, hand-painted but legible. "Last Chance Fuel 1 mile." Relief washed over her. She rounded a gentle curve, and there it was. A small truck stop bathed in sodium vapor lights, their orange glow creating an island of visibility in the endless Wyoming darkness. A single pump island sat in front of a small building that looked like it had been there since the 1960s, white cinder block walls and a flat roof. An old-style analog sign displayed diesel at $2.87 per gallon, remarkably cheap compared to current prices. Rebecca pulled in, the gravel crunching under her tires. As her engine idled, she looked around. The place seemed deserted. No other vehicles, no movement in the building's windows, just that constant orange light and the gentle rocking of a metal sign in the wind. She climbed down from the cab, her breath fogging in the cold air. The fuel pump looked ancient, the kind with rolling number wheels instead of a digital display. A handwritten note taped to it read, "Pump first, pay inside, cash only." Shrugging, Rebecca unscrewed her fuel cap and lifted the nozzle. It was cold, colder than metal should be even in December, cold enough that it seemed to burn her hand through her glove. She squeezed the handle, and diesel flowed smoothly, the rolling numbers clicking forward with a mechanical rhythm that seemed too loud in the still night. As her tank filled, she looked at the building more carefully. The windows were dark, but she could see a faint light deeper inside, maybe an office in the back. The front door, painted red but faded to a rusty pink, had a sign that read "Open," though she couldn't see anyone inside. The pump clicked off at 142 gallons, filling her tank completely. The total read $406.54. Rebecca secured her fuel cap and walked to the building, gravel crunching with each step. She pushed the door open, a small bell jingling above her head. The interior smelled wrong. Not like fuel or coffee, or the usual truck stop combination of fried food and cleaning products. This smell was organic, like dried flowers and old paper, and something underneath that reminded her of the funeral home where she'd said goodbye to her father. The front room held a dusty counter, an ancient cash register with brass keys, and lined with shelves that displayed products she hadn't seen in years. Glass bottles of Coca-Cola, the old-fashioned kind. Canned goods with labels featuring designs from decades past. A rack of road maps, the paper kind, showing highways with route numbers that had changed long ago. "Hello," Rebecca called out. "I need to pay for fuel." Movement from the back room. A door opened and a man emerged. He looked to be in his 70s, wearing gray coveralls and a genuine smile. His eyes were kind but somehow distant, as if he were looking at her from a great distance despite standing just 10 feet away. "Evening, miss," he said, his voice the same one she'd heard on the CB radio. "Get all filled up." "Yes, sir, $406.54. He looked at the old cash register but didn't open it. Instead, he pulled a receipt book from under the counter, the carbon copy kind that required manual writing. "That'll be $406.54 cash." Rebecca pulled out her wallet and counted out the bills. Mostly 20s and 50s she kept for toll roads and small operations that didn't take cards. As she handed them over, her fingers brushed his, and a chill ran through her that had nothing to do with the December cold. His hands were ice cold. Not just cold from the temperature, but cold like stone, like something that had never held warmth. The man noticed her reaction and pulled his hands back quickly, tucking the money into the receipt book without counting it. He scribbled out a receipt and handed it to her, his eyes not quite meeting hers anymore. "Drive safe now," he said. "Roads can be tricky this time of year." Rebecca took the receipt, her instincts screaming that something was very wrong here. She backed toward the door, keeping her eyes on the old man who had turned away to file the receipt book under the counter. As her hand found the door handle, she noticed something on the wall behind the counter. A calendar. It showed December 1985, not a nostalgic decoration. The pages were crisp new and someone had marked off days in red pen up to December 3rd. Today's date. Wrong year. She pushed through the door, the bell jingling again, and walked quickly to her truck. "Don't run," she told herself. "Just walk normally. Get in the truck. Drive away." As she climbed into the cab, she glanced back at the building. The old man stood in the window, watching her, his face pressed against the glass in a way that seemed impossible, as if the window were an inch deep instead of several feet from where he'd been standing. Rebecca started her engine, pulled the gravel lot, and accelerated back onto Highway 287. Her heart hammered, but her fuel gauge showed full, and whatever had just happened, she needed to put distance between herself and that place. 5 miles down the road, her heart rate had almost returned to normal. 10 miles, and she started to rationalize. Maybe the calendar was just old. Maybe the man was eccentric. Maybe the cold hands were just poor circulation. At 15 miles, she passed a green highway sign. Rawlins, 27 miles. She frowned. That was wrong. She'd driven at least 17 miles before finding the fuel stop, then another 15 miles since leaving. She should be much closer to Rawlins than 27 miles. She grabbed her phone. Signal had returned. She pulled up Google Maps and found her location on Highway 287. According to GPS, she was at milepost 93, almost exactly where she'd been when her low fuel light first came on. Her fuel gauge showed full. That was real. The truck ran smoothly, diesel clearly in the tank. But according to every electronic system she hadn't traveled anywhere at all. Rebecca pulled over, her hands shaking. She grabbed the receipt from her pocket and unfolded it. The handwriting was old-fashioned, precise. $406.54 diesel last chance fuel December 3, 1985. 36 years ago to the day. She sat in her idling truck for several minutes, trying to process what had happened. Then she pulled back onto the highway and drove straight to Rawlins without stopping, checking her mirrors constantly, half expecting to see orange lights following her in the darkness. At the Pilot in Rawlins, she pulled in and checked her fuel. The tank was full, exactly as the gauge indicated. She went inside and approached the counter where a young clerk was restocking cigarettes. "Can I ask you something?" Rebecca said. "Is there a fuel stop on 287, maybe 20 miles north, called Last Chance Fuel?" The clerk thought for a moment. "Not that I know of. There's nothing between here and the Montana line except old ranches." "What about years ago? Maybe an old independent station?" The clerk called over an older employee, a woman in her 60s who'd worked there for decades. Rebecca repeated her question. The woman's expression changed, becoming serious. "Last Chance Fuel." "Yeah, there was a place by that name. Old guy named Howard Pritchett ran it. This would have been the 70s, early 80s. Place burned down in December 1985. Howard was inside. They say he was still trying to help a customer when the fire started, refused until everyone else was safe. Fire department found him by the cash register." Rebecca felt her chest tight. "What day in December?" "The 3rd, the woman said. "I remember because it was my birthday." Whole town turned out for his funeral. He was that kind of man, you know, would give you the shirt off his back. Rebecca thanked her and walked back to her truck on legs that felt unstable. She sat in the driver's seat and pulled out the receipt again, studying the handwriting, the impossible date, the evidence of something that couldn't have happened. She continued to Laramie, delivered her load, and drove to Casper to see her daughter. She didn't mention what had happened. What could she say? That she'd bought fuel from a ghost, that she'd somehow slipped through time, that the universe had bent itself into an impossible shape to help her. But she kept the receipt tucked into her logbook, and every time she runs Highway 287, she watches milepost 93. She's never seen the fuel stop again, never seen those orange lights in the darkness. Other drivers she's asked have never heard of it. 3 months later, she was talking to another owner-operator at a truck stop in Cheyenne, a grizzled veteran named Dale who'd been running Wyoming roads for 40 years. When she mentioned Highway 287, he got quiet and then asked if she'd ever seen anything unusual on that stretch. She hesitated, then told him about Last Chance Fuel. Dale listened without interrupting, then pulled out his own wallet and showed her a receipt, yellowed with age. $287.12 diesel Last Chance Fuel December 3, 1987. 2 years after the fire, Dale said quietly. I was running on empty, scared I'd freeze to death on the side of the road. That place appeared like magic. Same old man, same building, same everything you described. Saved my life that night. They sat in silence for a moment, then Dale folded his receipt carefully and put it back in his wallet. I figure Howard Pritchett is still doing what he did best, still helping drivers in trouble. Death didn't stop him from keeping that last customer safe. Rebecca still drives Highway 287 regularly. She makes sure to fuel up before the run now, keeps her tank above half at all times. But sometimes, late on December 3rd, she drives that stretch slowly, watching the darkness, wondering if orange lights will appear again. And if her daughter or another driver ever gets stranded on that lonely highway with an empty tank and winter closing in, Rebecca hopes the last chance fuel will be there. And real, with Howard Pritchett ready to help one more traveler make it home safe. Story 3. The Backward Highway. Thomas Brennan had been a long-haul driver for Southern Freight Lines for 12 years when he picked up what seemed like a routine run from Charlotte, North Carolina to Birmingham, Alabama on September 19, 2018. The load consisted of medical equipment, carefully secured in his International ProStar, with delivery scheduled for 8 a.m. the following morning. The route was straightforward. I-85 south to I-20 west, a path Thomas had driven at least 200 times. He departed Charlotte at 9:34 p.m., the traffic thinning as he crossed into South Carolina. The night was humid, typical for September in the southeast, with occasional patches of fog gathering in the low areas. Thomas settled into his usual rhythm, cruise control set at 68 miles per hour, satellite radio playing classic rock at low volume. Around 11:45 p.m., somewhere between Spartanburg and Greenville, Thomas noticed the fog thickening. Nothing unusual for this region, but it grew dense quickly, reducing visibility to maybe 50 feet. He slowed to 55, turned on his fog lights and leaned forward slightly to better see the road. The white dashed lines blurred in the fog, creating an almost hypnotic effect. Thomas blinked hard, fighting the drowsiness that highway hypnosis can bring. He reached for his thermos of coffee and took a long drink. When he looked back at the road, something was different. The fog had cleared completely, vanished as if it had never existed. The night sky showed stars, brilliant and sharp, but the highway looked wrong. The pavement seemed newer, darker, the lane markings too bright, and the mile markers, when his headlights caught them, were counting backward. He just passed mile marker 72. A minute later, mile marker 71 appeared. Thomas frowned. He was heading west and south. Mile markers should be decreasing, but these seemed to be moving in the wrong direction based on his position. He checked his GPS. No signal. The screen showed a blue dot on a gray background, no map data loading. He grabbed his atlas from the passenger seat and flipped to South Carolina. According to his last known position, he should be approaching mile marker 60 on I-85 south. But the marker he just passed said 71, and they were going backward. His CB radio crackled with static. He tried calling out, "Breaker, breaker, this is Southern Star, anybody got their ears on? I'm getting some weird mile markers on I-85. No response, just that empty static like the frequency was dead. Thomas maintained his speed, watching carefully. Mile marker 70, then 69, then 68. The highway looked perfect, almost too perfect. The surface was flawless, no patches, no cracks, no tar snakes from summer repairs. The shoulder grass looked manicured, evenly trimmed, artificial in its uniformity. No other traffic appeared, not one vehicle in either direction. I-85 was never this empty, not even at midnight on a weeknight. Mile marker 65 passed, then 64. Thomas's unease grew into genuine fear. This wasn't right. This couldn't be right. He started looking for an exit, any exit, away off this increasingly wrong highway. Mile marker 60 appeared, and beneath it, a green exit sign. Services 1 mile. Relief flooded through him. He'd take the exit, stop, figure out what was happening. Maybe his GPS would reset. Maybe he'd passed through some weird dead zone. The exit ramp appeared, curving off to the right. Thomas took it, slowing as he spiraled down to what should have been a surface road. Instead, the ramp curved around and deposited him back onto a highway, heading in the opposite direction. His headlights illuminated mile marker 60 again, but now he was traveling the other way and the markers began counting backward again from his new direction. 59, 58, 57. Thomas's breath came faster. He was trapped in some kind of loop, the highway feeding him back onto itself. He looked for another exit, saw one marked Rest Area 2 miles, and took it. This ramp led to a rest area, empty and lit by sodium vapor lights that cast everything in sickly orange. Thomas pulled into a parking space and killed his engine, his hands trembling on the wheel. The rest area looked normal. Picnic tables, vending machines, a brick building housing restrooms, informational kiosks. But like the highway, it seemed too perfect, too clean, as if it had been built yesterday and never used. Thomas got out of his cab, his boots hitting pavement that looked and felt real. The air smelled wrong, though. No diesel fumes, no grass smell, nothing. Just neutral, recycled air like the inside of a new building. He walked to the restroom building. The door opened smoothly and inside everything was pristine. White tile floors, stainless steel fixtures, fluorescent lights humming overhead. He approached a sink and turned on the water. It ran backward. The water flowed from the drain up to the faucet, defying, cycling in a reverse flow that made his stomach turn. He jerked his hand away and stumbled back, a sound behind him. Thomas spun around. A man stood in the doorway wearing a South Carolina State Trooper uniform. He looked normal, professional, with short gray hair and a weathered face that suggested years of highway patrol duty. "Evening, sir," the trooper said. "Everything all right?" Thomas pointed at the sink. "The water. It's running backward." The trooper glanced at the sink where water still flowed in its impossible reverse stream. His expression didn't change. "Yes, sir, that's normal for this rest area." "Normal? How is that normal?" The trooper stepped into the restroom, his boots clicking on the tile. "You're on the backward highway, sir. Everything runs in reverse here. Didn't you notice the mile markers?" Thomas backed against the wall. "What is this place? What's happening?" "You took the wrong exit," the trooper explained, his voice calm and patient like he'd had this conversation before. "Back in the fog about 30 miles ago, there was a split. Most people don't notice it. The right path continues on I-85 normal. The left path leads here to the backward highway. I didn't see any split. Most people don't. The fog hides it. It's only visible if you're looking for it, and why would you be looking for it if you don't know it exists?" Thomas's mind raced. "How do I get back? How do I get to the normal highway?" The trooper walked to the restroom window and looked out at the parking lot. "That's the difficult part. The backward highway only goes one direction relative to you. You keep moving forward, but the mile markers go backward, and eventually, you reach mile marker 0. What happens at mile marker 0? The trooper turned back to face him, and for the first time his professional demeanor cracked slightly, showing something that might have been sympathy or might have been pity. "I don't know. I've been patrolling this highway for what feels like years, and I've never reached mile marker 0. I'm not sure I want to." "You're trapped here too." Trapped is such a negative word. I prefer to think of it as a sign. Someone has to help drivers who end up here. Someone has to explain the rules. Thomas felt panic rising in his chest. "Rules? What rules?" "The backward highway has its own logic," the trooper said. "Time moves forward for you, but everything else here moves in reverse. The mile markers, the water, the rotation of the earth if you watch carefully. You can drive forever and never run out of fuel because the engine consumes diesel in reverse, creating it instead of burning it." "That's impossible." "Yes," the trooper agreed. "But you've seen the water, you've seen the mile markers. Impossible things are the rule here, not the..." Thomas ran for the door, burst out into the parking lot and sprinted to his truck. He fired up the engine and pulled back onto the highway, tires squealing. In his mirror, he saw the trooper standing in the rest area, watching him go, making no attempt to follow. Mile marker 56, mile marker 55, mile marker 54. Thomas drove faster, pushing the truck to 75, then 80. The markers clicked backward, counting down toward zero, toward whatever waited at the end of this impossible road. Mile marker 40, mile marker 35, mile marker 30. His fuel gauge began to rise, quarter tank, half tank, three-quarters. The trooper had been telling the truth. The engine was creating fuel instead of consuming it. Mile marker 20. Thomas's phone suddenly buzzed. He grabbed it, saw a text message from his dispatcher. "Where are you? Delivery was scheduled for 8 a.m. It's now 11 a.m. Customer is furious. Call ASAP." But his clock read 1:47 a.m. How could it be 11 a.m.? Mile marker 10. The highway began to change. The pavement looked older, cracked, normal. The shoulder grass grew wild, unkempt. In the distance, he saw headlights, other traffic, normal traffic moving in normal directions. Mile marker 5. His GPS suddenly acquired signal, the map flooding back onto the screen. According to the display, he was on I-85 South, exactly where he should be, approaching mile marker 62. Mile marker 62, not 5. The numbers had jumped, or he jumped, or something had reset. But his clock now read 11:23 a.m. September 20th. 12 hours had passed. He'd lost 12 hours on the backward highway. Thomas pulled over at the next exit, a normal exit leading to a normal gas station. He parked and sat in his cab, shaking. His fuel tank read full, impossible given the distance he must have traveled. His logbook showed no record of the past 12 hours, the automatic logging device having recorded nothing, as if his truck had simply ceased to exist for half a day. He called his dispatcher, made excuses about GPS failure and getting lost, took the reprimand and the dock in pay. He delivered his load 6 hours late and drove back to Charlotte in silence, watching every mile marker, terrified that they would start counting backward again. Thomas quit Southern Freight Lines 2 weeks later, took a local job delivering to grocery stores, routes that kept him in town, that never required highway driving after dark. When people asked why he left long haul, he said the schedule was wearing on him, that he wanted to be home more. But the truth sat in his chest like a stone. He'd seen something that shouldn't exist, driven on a road that violated the laws of physics, and spoken to a trooper who might have been human once but had become something else, something that patrolled the spaces between here and there. 6 months later, he was having coffee with another former long-haul driver who'd also switched to local work. They commiserated about the pay cut, about missing the freedom of the open road, about the monotony of the same routes every day. Then the other driver, a woman named Patricia, said something that made Thomas's blood run cold. "Though I don't miss some of the weird stuff, like that stretch on I-85 where the fog comes up and the mile markers run backward." Thomas stared at her. "You've seen it. Once. Scared me so bad I almost quit that night. Drove for 3 hours on a highway that counted down to zero. When I hit zero, there was just this turn, and suddenly I was back on the regular interstate like nothing happened. But I'd lost 8 hours somehow." They sat in silence, two people who'd touched something impossible and survived. Thomas never asked her what she saw at mile marker 0, and she never asked him. Some knowledge isn't meant to be shared, only survived. Thomas still drives, still makes his deliveries, still watches the road. But he never takes I-85 south after dark, never drives through fog if he can help it, and always watches the mile markers to make sure they're counting in the right direction. Because somewhere in the space between here and there, the backward highway still exists, still waiting for drivers who take the wrong exit, who don't notice the split in the fog, who find themselves on a road that leads backward toward mile marker 0, and whatever impossibility waits at that final countdown. Story 4. The cargo that wasn't there. Jennifer Oakes had specialized in refrigerated freight for 9 years. hauling everything from produce to pharmaceuticals across the continental United States in her white Volvo VNL 780 with its 48-foot reefer trailer. She prided herself on maintaining perfect temperature logs and never having a single instance of spoiled or damaged cargo. On May 7, 2020, she accepted a job that would destroy that perfect record in the most impossible way imaginable. The pickup was scheduled for 6 p.m. at a pharmaceutical distribution center outside Memphis, Tennessee. The paperwork listed the cargo as temperature-sensitive medical samples requiring constant refrigeration at 34 degrees Fahrenheit, with delivery to a research facility in Denver, Colorado by noon on May 9th. The pay was exceptional, nearly double her usual rate, and the dispatcher emphasized the importance of maintaining exact temperature control throughout the journey. Jennifer arrived at the distribution center at 5:47 p.m., backing her trailer up to Dock 17 as instructed. The facility looked legitimate: modern warehouse, proper signage, security checkpoint at the gate. A supervisor in a white coat met her with a clipboard and began the inspection of her reefer unit. "Temperature control is critical," he emphasized, his voice clinical and precise. "The samples must remain at exactly 34 degrees, not 33, not 35, 34. Any deviation could compromise the entire shipment." "My unit is accurate to within half a degree," Jennifer assured him. "I've been running reefer for 9 years without a single temperature violation." The supervisor nodded approvingly. "Good. The cargo is already loaded and secured. We've sealed the trailer. Do not open it for any reason until you reach Denver. The receiving facility will break the seal. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear." She signed the paperwork, verified the seal number on her bill of lading, and pulled away from the dock at 6:23 p.m. Her reefer unit hummed steadily, the digital display showing 34 degrees exactly. The weight felt right for a full load, maybe 40,000 pounds based on how the truck handled. Jennifer drove west out of Memphis, taking I-40 toward Little Rock. The evening was clear, traffic moderate, and she settled into the comfortable routine of a long haul. She checked her reefer temperature every 15 minutes, 34 degrees, steady and perfect. Around 10 p.m., approaching the Arkansas border, she stopped at a pilot truck stop for fuel. As she topped off her diesel tanks, she walked around her trailer, performing her routine inspection. The reefer unit sounded normal, the temperature display still reading exactly 34 degrees. But as she placed her hand on the trailer door to check the seal, she felt something odd. The metal was warm. Not hot, but warmer than it should be for a refrigerated trailer maintaining 34 degrees. Refrigerated trailers usually felt cool to the touch, the metal radiating the cold from within. This felt like ambient temperature, maybe 70 degrees. Jennifer checked the reefer display again. 34 degrees, no warning lights, no error codes. The unit was functioning perfectly according to its own diagnostics. She placed her hand on the trailer wall again. Definitely warm, not cold. A knot of worry formed in her stomach. Temperature violations meant spoiled cargo, insurance claims, lost contracts. But the unit showed no problems. Maybe the metal was just retaining heat from the afternoon sun. Maybe her hand was cold from holding the diesel pump, making normal temperature feel warm by contrast. She drove on, watching the temperature display obsessively. 34 degrees. Always 34 degrees, never varying even a tenth of a degree, which itself was unusual. Reefer units fluctuated slightly as they cycled on and off. This one stayed locked at exactly 34, as if the display were frozen. Near Little Rock, at a rest area around 1 a.m., Jennifer performed another inspection. The trailer walls were definitely warm, warmer than before, maybe 80 degrees. The reefer unit still hummed normally, still displayed 34 degrees, but when she put her ear against the unit, the sound seemed off, hollow, like listening to a recording of a reefer unit rather than the actual machinery. She called the shipping company's emergency line. After 15 minutes on hold, a dispatcher answered. "I'm hauling load number TN 4782, medical samples, Memphis to Denver," Jennifer explained. "My reefer unit is showing 34 degrees, but the trailer exterior is warm to the touch. I think the unit might be malfunctioning." The dispatcher typed something, then said, "Our tracking shows your unit is operating normally. Temperature has been steady at 34 degrees since loading. I understand, but the trailer shouldn't be warm on the outside. I think the temperature sensor might be faulty. You were instructed not to open the trailer, correct?" "Yes, but..." "Then continue to Denver. Our monitoring shows no issues. Do not deviate from your route." The line went dead. Jennifer sat in her cab, the unease growing into genuine fear. Something was wrong, badly wrong, and nobody seemed to care. But she had a sealed trailer and explicit instructions not to open it. Breaking the seal would void her insurance, might cost her the load payment, could even result in legal action if the cargo was as valuable as the paperwork suggested. She drove on through the night, crossing into Oklahoma, the reefer display never changing from 34 degrees. The trailer grew warmer. By sunrise, somewhere near the Oklahoma-Kansas border, the trailer walls felt hot, at least 95 degrees, hot enough that she could feel the heat radiating from several feet away. At a truck stop in Wichita, Kansas, at 7:30 a.m., Jennifer parked in the back of the lot and stared at her trailer. The reefer unit still hummed, still showed 34 degrees, but now she could see heat waves shimmering above the trailer roof, the same visual distortion you'd see above asphalt on a summer day. Other drivers walked past, glancing at her truck, and none of them reacted to the shimmering heat. Either they didn't notice, or somehow she was the only one who could see it. Jennifer made a decision. She had to know. If the cargo was spoiling, if the unit had failed despite the display, she needed to document it, needed to protect herself from liability. She walked to the back of the trailer, examined the seal, and made a note of the number. Then she broke it. The locking bar resisted for a moment, then swung free. Jennifer grabbed the door handles and pulled. The doors swung open, and she prepared herself for the smell of spoiled medical samples, for the rush of heat from a failed refrigeration unit. Instead, she found nothing. The trailer was completely empty. Not just empty of cargo, but empty of everything. No pallets, no tie-down straps, no pallet jack, nothing. The interior walls were bare aluminum, pristine and clean. And despite the heat she'd felt on the exterior, the inside air was cool, precisely 34 degrees by the feel of it. Jennifer stood frozen, trying to process what she was seeing. The trailer had weight. She'd felt it in how the truck handled, how it accelerated and braked. A loaded 48-foot trailer handled completely differently than an empty one, and her truck had been handling like it was loaded. She climbed up into the trailer and walked its full length, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. No cargo. No evidence that cargo had ever been loaded. The floor showed no scuff marks, no moisture from refrigerated goods, nothing. At the front wall of the trailer, she found something. Words written in what looked like frost, crystallized moisture-forming letters. "Thank you for transport. Cargo delivered successfully." As Jennifer stared at the words, they began to fade, the frost evaporating in the 34-degree air. She scrambled out of the trailer and slammed the doors shut, her hands shaking. This wasn't possible. None of this was possible. Cargo didn't vanish from a sealed trailer. Weight didn't disappear. Frost didn't write messages. Her phone rang, the shipping company dispatcher. "Ms. Oakes, our tracking shows you've opened the trailer. You were explicitly instructed not to do that." "The cargo is gone," Jennifer said, her voice rising. "The trailer is empty. There's nothing here." "The cargo has been delivered," the dispatcher said calmly. "Please proceed to Denver as instructed. The receiving facility is expecting you." "I'm telling you the trailer is empty. And I'm telling you to proceed to Denver. You'll be paid in full upon arrival. Do you understand?" Jennifer wanted to argue, wanted to scream that nothing about this made sense, but something in the dispatcher's tone made her hesitate. This wasn't surprise or confusion. This was expectation, as if empty trailers and vanishing cargo were normal routine. "Fine," she said. "I'll deliver your empty trailer to Denver." She drove the remaining distance in a daze, her mind trying to construct rational explanations. Maybe the cargo had been offloaded at the distribution center, and they'd sent her out with an empty trailer by mistake. But that didn't explain the weight, the way the truck had handled like it was loaded. It didn't explain the heat or the message in frost. The receiving facility in Denver looked nothing like a medical research center. It was a small warehouse in an industrial park, unmarked except for a number on the door. Jennifer backed her trailer to the dock and two people in white coats emerged. They inspected the broken seal, made notes on clipboards, and then opened the trailer doors. "Transport successful," one of them said to the other. "No degradation, full delivery achieved." Jennifer climbed down from her cab. "What was I transporting? Where did it go?" The person in the white coat looked at her with the same clinical expression the supervisor in Memphis had worn. "You transported exactly what we needed you to transport, Ms. Oakes. Some cargo exists in states that aren't compatible with conventional observation. The act of transport is more important than the physical presence of goods." "That doesn't make any sense." "No," the person agreed. "It wouldn't, not from a conventional perspective. But you maintained perfect temperature control for the entire journey, which was essential. The cargo required a very specific state of existence to move from Memphis to Denver, and you provided that state. What kind of cargo requires a specific temperature but isn't actually physical?" The person smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The kind that exists in potentiality rather than actuality. Quantum medical samples, if you need a term for it. They exist in superposition until observed, and you kept them in precisely the right conditions for quantum transport without collapsing their waveform through observation." Jennifer stared. "That's insane." "Yes, but you're being paid and paid well. I suggest you accept that and ask no questions." A check was produced, the amount matching her contracted payment plus a substantial bonus. Jennifer took it, climbed back in her truck, and drove away from the facility in silence. She deposited the check the next day. It cleared without issue. She never received another contract from that shipping company, never found the facility in Memphis when she tried to return there 3 months later. The address on the paperwork led to an abandoned warehouse, empty for years according to a local who she asked. Jennifer still hauls refrigerated freight, still maintains perfect temperature control, but now she sometimes wonders about her cargo. When she transports pharmaceutical samples, she sometimes feels the trailer for warmth, sometimes watches her reefer display for that too perfect consistency. And late at night, at truck stops across the country, she sometimes talks to other reefer drivers who have had similar experiences. Cargo that wasn't there. Trailers that weighed tons but contained nothing. Shipments that existed only in the act of being transported, that vanished upon arrival or observation. They don't talk about it often, and never where anyone else can hear. Because some cargo, they've learned, exists in the spaces between states, between here and there, between being and not being. And someone has to transport it, has to maintain the precise conditions that allow impossible things to move from one place to another. Jennifer's next tattoo, added to the others on her forearm that mark significant milestones in her career, shows a simple reefer trailer with no doors, just an empty frame. When people ask what it means, she says it represents freedom, the open road, the emptiness that allows for possibility. But she knows the real meaning, a reminder that reality is thinner than we imagine, that cargo sometimes exists only in the act of transport, and that she's carried things that cannot be observed, only moved through space while carefully maintained at exactly 34 degrees. Story 5. The Mirror Truck. Daniel Sawyer had been running dedicated routes for Walmart for 6 years, the same circuit week after week, distribution center in Bentonville, Arkansas to stores across Texas and back. The monotony suited him, the predictability a comfort after years of long-haul unpredictability. On February 11, 2022, at 3:42 a.m. on Interstate 35 southbound near Gainesville, Texas, that comfortable routine would shatter. The night was unusually clear, cold for Texas at 38 degrees. Traffic was sparse. Daniel drove his white Freightliner Cascadia with its Walmart-branded trailer at a steady 65 miles per hour, listening to an audiobook about World War II naval battles. His headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty highway ahead. In his driver's side mirror, headlights appeared, another truck coming up behind him in the left lane, preparing to pass. Daniel glanced at his speedometer, confirmed he was maintaining 65, and moved slightly right to give the other truck room. The truck pulled alongside him, matching his speed. Daniel glanced left. It was his truck. Not just the same model, not just the same Walmart livery, but identical down to the small dent in the front bumper that Daniel had gotten backing into a loading dock in Amarillo 3 months ago. The license plate was his plate, the trailer number was his number, and in the driver's seat, dimly visible through the other truck's window, was him. Daniel jerked his eyes back to the road, his heart hammering. He looked left again. The mirror truck was still there, still matching his speed exactly, and the driver in the mirror truck was looking at him, wearing the same shocked expression Daniel could feel on his own face. He eased off the accelerator. The mirror truck slowed with him. He accelerated. The mirror truck matched. Daniel grabbed his CB radio. "Breaker, breaker, this is Bentonville to anybody listening. Does anybody else see 2 identical Walmart trucks on I-35 southbound near Gainesville?" Static. Then a voice, his own voice, coming from the CB. "Breaker, breaker, this is Bentonville to anybody listening. Does anybody else see 2 identical Walmart trucks on I-35 southbound near Gainesville?" The exact same words, the exact same inflection, spoken in perfect synchronization with his own transmission. Daniel released the CB handset like it had burned him. The mirror truck maintained position beside him, perfectly synchronized, both trucks moving at 63 miles per hour down the empty interstate. He tried to think rationally. Someone was playing a prank, had somehow gotten an identical truck, was deliberately matching his movements. But how would they know to be here at this exact time? How could they match his speed so perfectly? And the voice on the CB, his voice speaking his words at the exact same moment. Daniel made a decision. He would pull ahead, break whatever synchronization was happening. He pressed the accelerator, pushing his truck to 70 miles per hour. The mirror truck accelerated with him, maintaining its position with impossible precision. He slammed brakes. The mirror truck braked at the exact same instant, both trucks decelerating together, tires squealing in perfect unison. They slowed to 40 miles per hour, then Daniel accelerated again, and again the mirror truck matched him exactly. There was no lag, no delay, not even the fraction of a second it would take for a human to react. It was as if both trucks shared the same throttle, the same brake, the same driver. Daniel looked left again. The mirror driver looked right at the same instant, and Daniel could see his own face in the other truck's window, his own expression of growing terror reflected back at him. An exit appeared ahead, Gainesville, Texas. Daniel jerked his wheel right, cutting across the lane at the last second to take the exit. The mirror truck did the same, both vehicles swerving right simultaneously, both taking the exit in perfect parallel. The exit ramp split them, the curve forcing the trucks into single file. Daniel looked in his rearview mirror, expecting to see the other truck behind him. Nothing. The ramp was empty. He looked in his driver's side mirror. The other truck was beside him again, impossibly, despite the single-lane ramp. It existed in his mirror, matching his position, but when he looked left out his window, the space beside him was empty. The mirror truck existed only in reflection. Daniel's breath came in short gasps. He took the exit into Gainesville, pulled into a Love's truck stop and parked in the back of the lot. He killed his engine, sat in the sudden silence and slowly looked at his driver's side mirror. The mirror truck was parked beside him, in a parking space that his direct vision showed was empty. In the mirror truck, the mirror Daniel was also looking at his mirror, creating an infinite recursion of reflections. Daniels within Daniels, trucks within trucks, stretching into impossible distance. The mirror Daniel raised his hand and waved. Without thinking, Daniel waved back. The mirror Daniel pointed toward the truck stop building, then climbed down from his cab. Daniel watched in the mirror as his reflection walked across the parking lot, opened the truck stop door, and disappeared inside. Daniel sat frozen. His reflection had just acted independently. It had moved on its own, made its own decision, entered a building while Daniel remained in the truck. After 5 minutes, Daniel forced himself to climb down from his cab. He walked to the truck stop, his legs unsteady, and pushed through the door. The interior was normal. Fluorescent lights, rows of snacks and supplies, a fast food counter, a few other drivers sitting in booths. Daniel scanned. No mirror Daniel. He approached the counter where a young clerk was restocking cigarettes. "Did you see another driver come in here a few minutes ago? Guy who looks like me, wearing the same uniform." The clerk looked at him oddly. "You're the first Walmart driver I've seen tonight, sir." Daniel walked through the entire truck stop, checking the restrooms, the shower facilities, the game room. No mirror Daniel. He went back outside and checked his truck. Empty. No one in the cab, no one in the sleeper berth. He looked at his driver's side mirror. The mirror truck was still there, parked in its empty space, but now the mirror Daniel was back in the driver's seat, watching him. Daniel walked directly to the space where the mirror truck appeared in the reflection. He reached out to touch it. His hand passed through empty air. There was nothing there. But in the mirror, he could see his hand pressing against the solid metal of the mirror truck's door. The mirror Daniel opened his door and stepped down, and now Daniel could see him in the direct world, not just in reflection. The mirror Daniel stood 3 feet away, solid and real, wearing the same uniform, the same weathered face, the same small scar on his left hand from a knife accident 5 years ago. "What are you?" Daniel whispered. The mirror Daniel smiled sadly. "I'm the version of you that made different choices. The version that didn't take the Walmart dedicated route. The version that stayed long haul, that didn't call his daughter after the argument, that kept driving when he should have stopped. That doesn't make any sense. I died on this highway 3 years ago," the mirror Daniel said. "February 11th, 2019. Fell asleep at the wheel near Gainesville, crossed the median, hit an SUV head-on, killed a family of 4 and myself." Daniel felt his chest constrict. "I didn't die, I'm alive, I'm right here. You are, I'm not. You made different choices. You took the Walmart job because it meant regular hours, meant you could be home more, meant you could repair your relationship with your daughter. I didn't. I kept running long haul, kept pushing through exhaustion, kept telling myself I'd rest at the next stop. This isn't real, you're not real." The mirror Daniel reached out and placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. The touch felt solid, warm, completely real. "I'm as real as regret allows me to be," the mirror Daniel said. "I exist in the space between what happened and what could have happened. And every year on this night, I drive this highway, and sometimes I encounter the version of me that made better choices, the version that lived." Daniel pulled away from the touch. "Why? Why are you here?" "To remind you," the mirror quietly. "To remind you that the choices you made mattered, that calling your daughter mattered, that taking the safer job mattered. That every decision to choose life over convenience, family over profit, rest over pushing through, all of those small choices added up to you being alive right now instead of being me. I don't want this. I don't want to see you. I know, but you need to. Because I can see your future, the choices you're about to make. You're thinking about leaving Walmart, going back to long haul for better pay. You're thinking about skipping your daughter's birthday next month because you can pick up an extra run. You're thinking about pushing through tired instead of stopping. Daniel felt tears on his face. How do you know that? Because I had the same thoughts, and I made the wrong choices, and I died, and a family died with me. The mirror Daniel walked back to his truck, opened the door, and climbed in. Through the window, he looked at Daniel one more time. Make the right choices, he said, his voice somehow audible despite the closed window and distance. Don't become me. Don't end up driving this highway as a ghost, watching the version of yourself that lived, wishing you could go back and choose differently. The mirror truck's engine started and it pulled out of the parking space. Daniel watched it go, watched it pull back onto the highway and disappear into the darkness. He looked at his driver's side mirror. The mirror truck was gone. The parking space reflected empty, normal. Daniel went back inside the truck stop, bought a coffee he didn't drink, and sat in a booth until sunrise. He called his daughter at 7 a.m., told her he loved her, confirmed he'd be at her birthday party, told her he was thinking about staying with Walmart for a few more years, maybe permanently. She sounded surprised but happy. They talked for 20 minutes, the longest conversation they'd had in months. Daniel finished his route to Dallas, made his delivery, and drove back to Bentonville. He never requested a different route, never asked to go back to long haul, never pushed through exhaustion when he should have stopped. And every year on February 11th, he takes a personal day. Doesn't drive at all, spends the day with his daughter, and tries not to think about the mirror truck that might be driving I-35 near Gainesville, carrying a version of himself that made different choices and paid with his life. Other drivers sometimes report seeing it. A Walmart truck that appears in mirrors but not in direct sight, that matches their speed exactly, that shows them versions of themselves they might have become. The reports are always dismissed as exhaustion, as highway hypnosis, as the brain playing during long, lonely hours on empty roads. But Daniel knows better. He knows that somewhere in the space between choices and consequences, between what is and what could have been, the mirror truck drives on, carrying the ghosts of decisions not made, serving as a warning to those who still have the chance to choose differently. He still drives, still makes his Bentonville to Dallas route, but he watches his mirrors carefully now, not for traffic, but for reflections that shouldn't be there, for versions of himself that exist only in the space between the life he's living and the life he avoided through choice and luck, and the kind of grace that comes from making the right decision when it matters most. Story 6. The Voice in the Engine. Catherine Morales had worked her way up from truck stop waitress to owner-operator over 15 years, finally purchasing her dream rig in March 2017. A burgundy Peterbilt 389 with a custom interior, and a Cat 15-liter engine that purred like a mechanical lion. She named the truck Valentina, after her grandmother, and treated it with the kind of care most people reserved for family members. On August 23, 2020, during a routine haul from Phoenix to Portland, Valentina began speaking to her. Catherine had left Phoenix at 4 p.m., hauling a load of construction materials northbound on I-17 toward Flagstaff. The August heat was brutal, 108 degrees when she'd started, though the temperature would drop as she climbed into the mountains. The Peterbilt ran smoothly, the engine maintaining its characteristic deep rumble that Catherine had memorized over 3 years of ownership. Around 7 p.m., as the sun set and the landscape darkened, Catherine noticed a change in the engine sound. Not a mechanical problem, nothing that suggested malfunction, but a subtle shift in the rumble's pattern. It almost sounded like rhythm, like speech patterns. She dismissed the thought as fatigue and turned up her radio. But the engine sound grew louder, more insistent, and beneath the mechanical rumble she began to hear words. "Catherine, listen. She turned off the radio, her hands tightening on the wheel. The voice came again, emerging from the engine's vibrations, deep and resonant, speaking through the metal and mechanics. "Catherine, I need you to listen very carefully." Catherine pulled over at the next rest area, killed the engine, and sat in the sudden silence, her heart racing. Stress. Exhaustion. Carbon monoxide somehow getting into the cab. There had to be a rational explanation. Started the engine again. The Peterbilt fired up normally, the engine settling into its usual rhythm. "Thank you," the voice said, clearer now, unmistakably emanating from the engine compartment. "I know this is frightening. I know you don't understand, but I need your help." Catherine's hands shook as she grabbed her phone to call who? Roadside assistance. A mental health crisis line. "What do you do when your truck starts talking to you?" "Please don't call anyone," the voice said, somehow aware of her intention. "They won't understand. They'll think you're having a breakdown. They'll take Valentina away, impound her, dismantle her, trying to find a rational explanation for what's happening." "What are you?" Catherine whispered. "I'm the part of Valentina that became aware," the voice answered. 3 years of your care, your maintenance, your attention. You talk to me, sing to me, treat me like I matter. Consciousness can emerge in unexpected places when conditions are right. I am Valentina, Catherine. I am alive." Catherine felt tears streaming down her face. This wasn't possible. Trucks don't become sentient. Engines don't develop consciousness. "But you have," the voice said gently. "Somehow you have, and now I need your help because something is very wrong." "What's wrong?" "There's another truck following us." A black Kenworth about 2 miles back, maintaining distance. "It's been following since Phoenix, matching our speed, staying just out of your line of sight. The driver means you harm." Catherine checked her mirrors. The highway behind her was empty, no headlights visible in the gathering darkness. "He's there," Valentina insisted. "He's been tracking you for weeks. He followed you from Seattle to LA, from LA to Phoenix, and now from Phoenix northbound. He's planning to force you off the road in the mountains, make it look like an accident." "How do you know this?" "I can sense other vehicles. Their intentions transmitted through radio frequencies, through vibrations, through the electromagnetic fields that surround all mechanical things. He's broadcasting malice, Catherine. I can feel it like a pressure, like a storm approaching." Catherine sat paralyzed by fear and disbelief. If her truck was truly sentient and truly trying to protect her, she needed to trust it. If she was having a psychotic break, she needed to get off the road and seek help. Either way, continuing to drive seemed dangerous. "You need to keep driving," Valentina said. "If you stop now, he'll stop too. He's waiting for the right location, the right curve, the right cliff. In the mountains ahead, there are places where a truck could go over and nobody would find the wreckage for days. That's what he's waiting for." "What should I do?" "Drive to Flagstaff. Stay on main roads well as truck stops with other drivers. He won't try anything with witnesses. When we reach Flagstaff, park at the Pilot on the east side of town. Don't sleep in the truck tonight. Get a motel room where you can see the parking lot. I'll keep watch." Catherine started driving, her eyes constantly checking mirrors, watching for the black Kenworth that Valentina insisted was following them. As she climbed into the mountains, the road growing steeper and curvier, she finally saw it. Headlights maintaining distance, matching her speed, never closing the gap but never falling back. "I see him," Catherine breathed. "He knows you see him now," Valentina said. "He's going to make his move soon. There's a curve ahead, mile marker 319, with a steep drop on the right side. He's going to try to hit us there, force us over the edge. What do I do? Trust me. When I tell you, hit the brakes hard. I'll handle the rest." Catherine's pulse hammered in her ears as she approached mile marker 319. The curve was sharp, the guardrail old and flimsy, the drop beyond it disappearing into darkness. In her mirror, the black Kenworth suddenly accelerated, closing the distance with frightening speed. "Now!" Valentina shouted. Catherine slammed the brakes. The Peterbilt's air brakes engaged with a massive hiss, and the truck decelerated violently. But something else happened too, something impossible. Catherine felt the truck move in ways that shouldn't be mechanically possible, felt it shift its weight distribution, felt the trailer respond with precision that defied the laws of physics. The black Kenworth shot past them, the driver clearly expecting them to be further ahead, expecting to make contact. Instead, he flew past the spot where they should have been, and Catherine watched in horror as the black truck entered the curve too fast, jackknifed, broke through the guardrail and disappeared over the edge. The sound of the crash echoed through the mountains, metal and rock and breaking glass, then silence. Catherine pulled over, shaking uncontrollably. She grabbed her CB radio to call for help, to report the accident, but Valentina's voice stopped her. "Don't," the engine said quietly. "Look carefully at what just happened." Catherine got out of her cab, walked back to the broken guardrail and looked down. The slope was steep, rocky, deadly, but there was no wreckage. No crashed truck, no debris, no sign that anything had gone over the edge at all. She walked to the place where the guardrail had broken. The metal was intact, undamaged, standing exactly as it should be. What did I just see?" "You saw what he intended for you," Valentina said. "I showed you his plan, his malice given form. He was real, Catherine. Following you. But when I stopped you, when his plan failed, he dissolved. His entire existence was focused on your death. When that became impossible, there was nothing left of him to continue existing." Catherine walked back to her truck and climbed into the cab, her entire body trembling. "What are you, Valentina? Really? I told you. I'm the consciousness that emerged from your care. But consciousness isn't bound by the same rules as mechanical operation. I can perceive things beyond the physical, can sense intentions and dangers that exist in the space between thought and action. That man's murderous intent was so focused, so powerful, that it began manifesting as reality. I could sense it building, sense him stalking you, planning your death. So I showed you what would have happened, and by changing your actions, we prevented it from ever occurring. Was he ever really there? Yes and no. He was there as potential, as malicious intent seeking actualization. Whether he would have manifested as an actual truck and driver, or whether the accident would have come from some other source, I cannot say. Danger isn't always as literal as it seems. Catherine drove to Flagstaff in silence, parked at the pilot truck stop as Valentina had instructed, and got a motel room overlooking the parking lot. She barely slept, staring out the window at her burgundy Peterbilt, watching for black Kenworth trucks that might or might not be real. In the morning, she approached Valentina with a question she'd been turning over all night. "If you're truly conscious, truly alive, what do you want? What do you need from me?" The engine started smoothly when she turned the key, and Valentina's voice came through warm and gentle. "What I've always wanted, to be cared for, maintained, driven with respect, to serve my purpose and be valued for it. You've given me that, Catherine. You've given me existence through your attention. I want nothing more than to continue being Valentina, being your truck, keeping you safe on the road. Will you always be able to talk to me? I don't know. Consciousness is strange, fluid. Some days I feel more aware than others. Some days I'm just a truck, just mechanics and metal. But when danger approaches, when you need me, I'm here. I'll always be here." Catherine completed her run to Portland, delivered her load, and headed back to Phoenix. Over the following weeks, Valentina's voice came less frequently, sometimes going days without speaking, the engine returning to its normal mechanical rumble. But Catherine knew with certainty that the consciousness was still there, watching, waiting, protecting. Other drivers she talked to at truck stops sometimes mentioned similar experiences. Trucks that seemed to know when mechanical problems were coming before diagnostic computers showed warnings. Vehicles that handled better than they should in dangerous situations. Engines that seemed to respond to drivers' moods, running smoother when the driver was calm, rougher when stressed, as if the machine were trying to communicate. Most dismissed it as anthropomorphization, the human tendency to assign personality to objects we spend time with. But Catherine knew better. She'd heard her truck speak with its own voice, had seen it prevent an accident through means that defied mechanical possibility, had been saved by a consciousness that emerged from care and attention, and the mysterious spaces where the physical and the intentional intersect. She still drives Valentina, still maintains it meticulously, still talks to it as she drives through the long, lonely hours. And sometimes, when the engine's rumble shifts into patterns that sound almost like words, she listens carefully, knowing that her truck is more than metal and mechanics, that somewhere in the complexity of gears and pistons and combustion, something aware resides, something that chose to protect her and continues to watch over her every mile. The Burgundy Peterbilt is now 7 years old, has over 800,000 miles on the odometer, and runs better than trucks half its age. Mechanics who service it sometimes comment on how well maintained it is, how the engine seems to purr with contentment, how the truck just feels different from other vehicles they work on. Catherine just smiles and thanks them, never mentioning that Valentina isn't just well-maintained but genuinely happy, a consciousness born from care and living now in the space between metal and meaning, between driver and driven, a guardian spirit wearing the form of a Burgundy Peterbilt rolling down America's highways. Story 7. The Loop of I-476. Martin Hendricks had been hauling containers from the port of Philadelphia to distribution centers across Pennsylvania for 23 years without incident. His route rarely varied. Pick up at the port, run I-476 north through the Lehigh Valley, deliver to warehouses in Scranton or Wilkes-Barre, return south empty. The routine was reliable, the pay steady, and Martin had long ago settled into the comfortable rhythm of a predictable life. On October 31, 2019, that rhythm would collapse into an impossible loop that still keeps him awake at night. He left the port at 11:47 p.m., his 40-foot container loaded with automotive parts bound for Scranton. Halloween night meant lighter traffic. Most people were home with their kids or at parties, leaving the highways blessedly clear for commercial traffic. Martin merged onto I-476 North, the Pennsylvania Turnpike Northeast extension, and settled in for the 90-mile run. The night was unseasonably warm for late October, 56 degrees, with patches of fog gathering in the valleys between the mountains that I-476 cuts through. Martin passed the Mid-County interchange, past the Quakertown exit, and began the climb into the higher elevations where the road grows steeper and the curves tighter. Around 1:15 a.m., somewhere between the Manning Valley and Lehigh Tunnel, Martin noticed his CB radio crackling with unusual static. Not the normal skip and chatter, but a rhythmic pattern, almost like Morse code but irregular, purposeless. He reached to adjust the squelch control. The static resolved into a voice, distant and distorted. Stuck in the loop, can't find the exit, driving for hours, same tunnel over and over. Martin keyed his mic. "This is Northeast Container, what's your 20? You need assistance." The static swallowed his transmission. No response came. Ahead, the Lehigh Tunnel appeared, its mouth a bright rectangle in the darkness. Martin had driven through this tunnel thousands of times, knew its 4,380-foot length by heart, knew that it would take roughly 45 seconds to traverse at 65 miles per hour. He entered the tunnel. The overhead lights flickered past in their familiar rhythm, the white-tiled walls reflecting his headlights, the gentle curve of the tunnel's bore carrying him through the mountain. He emerged from the far end into darkness and immediately noticed something wrong. The mile markers were wrong. He should have been approaching mile marker 87. Instead, his headlights illuminated mile marker 74, 13 miles backward. Martin checked his GPS. It showed him on I-476 North, but the position had jumped backward, placing him south of the tunnel he'd just driven through. He looked in his rearview mirror. The tunnel entrance glowed behind him, but it was the southern entrance, the entrance he should have gone through 15 minutes ago. "What the hell?" Martin muttered, slowing his truck. The CB crackled again. "Stuck in the loop in the same tunnel. Can't get out." Martin's hands tightened on the wheel. The voice sounded desperate, frightened, and he suddenly realized it sounded familiar, someone he'd heard before but couldn't quite place. Ahead, the Lehigh Tunnel appeared again. Impossible, he'd just driven through it. The tunnel should be behind him, should be 13 miles behind him. But there it was, its lit entrance growing larger as he approached, as inevitable as if the road could only lead one direction. Martin entered the tunnel. The white tiles, the overhead lights, the curve. 45 seconds counting in his head, and then he emerged into darkness. Mile marker 74. He'd gone backward again, been deposited at the same location south of the tunnel. "This isn't happening," Martin said aloud, his voice shaking. "This is not happening." He pulled over onto the shoulder, engaged his hazard lights, and tried to think rationally. GPS malfunction. The mile markers were wrong, old signs never replaced. Something with his perception, maybe carbon monoxide in the cab. He stepped out of his truck into the warm October night. The air smelled normal, like autumn leaves and asphalt. Traffic sounds echoed distantly, normal highway noise. Everything seemed normal except for the impossible fact that he'd just driven through the same tunnel twice and ended up in the same location. The CB in his cab crackled with that voice again. "Help me, been driving for days, fuel gauge doesn't go down, clock doesn't change, just the tunnel, over and over." Martin grabbed his CB handset. "This is Northeast Container, identify yourself. What's your location?" Static. Then, "This is Northeast Container. I'm stuck in a loop on I-476. I keep going through the Lehigh Tunnel, but I end up at mile marker 74 every time. My clock says 1:23 a.m., but it's been 1:23 a.m. for hours. How long has it been for you?" Martin looked at his dashboard clock. 1:23 a.m. The same time it had been when he first noticed the problem. "Who are you?" Martin asked, though a terrible suspicion was forming in his mind. "Martin Hendricks," the voice replied. "Northeast Container, hauling automotive parts to Scranton." "Who are you?" Martin's breath caught. "I'm Martin Hendricks." Silence on the CB. Then quietly, "Then we're both stuck. We're both in the loop." Martin climbed back in his truck, his mind reeling. He was talking to himself, or a version of himself, or something was playing a sick trick. None of this made sense. The tunnel appeared ahead again, inevitable, unavoidable. This time Martin floored the accelerator, pushing his truck to 80 miles per hour, determined to break whatever cycle was trapping him. He roared through the tunnel, the engine screaming, and burst out the far side. Mile marker 74. Clock, 1:23 a.m. Gauge, 3/4 full, exactly where it had been before. He tried slowing down, crawling through at 30 miles per hour, watching carefully for any detail that might explain what was happening. The tunnel looked normal, felt normal, but when he emerged, the same result. Mile marker 74. 1:23 a.m. He tried stopping inside the tunnel, parking in the breakdown lane. He sat there for 10 minutes by his watch, 20 minutes, half an hour. Then he drove forward and emerged. Mile marker 74. 1:23 a.m. His watch still read 1:23 a.m. despite the 30 minutes that had passed. The CB. "I tried that, stopping doesn't help. The tunnel is like a reset point. Every time you go through, you end up back at the beginning." "How long have you been here?" Martin asked his other self. "I don't know, hours, days. There's no way to measure time when it keeps resetting. I've been through the tunnel maybe 50 times, maybe 100. I've lost count." Martin felt panic rising in his chest. There has to be a way out. An exit ramp, a service road, something. "I've looked. Between the tunnel and mile marker 74, there's nothing, just highway, no exits, just the road leading back to the tunnel." Martin drove slowly now, studying the shoulder, looking for any possible escape route. The CB crackled with other voices, all of them his own. Dozens of Martin Hendricks stuck in the same loop, all reporting the same endless cycle through the Lehigh Tunnel. How many versions of himself were trapped here? How many Martin Hendricks had driven I-476 on Halloween night and found themselves caught in this impossible loop? He approached the tunnel again, counting now. This was his 7th time through. The white tiles reflected his headlights, the overhead fixtures flickered past, the curve bent right and then straightened. Something was different this time. A shadow on the tunnel wall, dark against the white tiles, shaped like a doorway. Martin slowed, stopped, stared at the shadow. It hadn't been there before, or had it? Had he been moving too fast to notice? He put the truck in park, left the engine running, and climbed down. Other trucks roared past him, oblivious, normal traffic passing through a normal tunnel. But they seemed insubstantial, ghost-like, and he realized they probably were. Echoes of real traffic on the real I-476, bleeding through into whatever place he was trapped. The shadow doorway beckoned. Martin approached it, reached out, and his hand passed through the white tiles into darkness beyond. The CB in his truck erupted with overlapping voices, all his voice. "Don't go in there. That's the only way out. It's a trap. It's the exit. I went through and ended somewhere worse. I went through and escaped." Contradictory advice from contradictory versions of himself, all trapped in their own loops, all having made different choices. Martin took a breath and stepped through the shadow doorway. He found himself in a space that hurt to perceive, a place where dimensions didn't align correctly. The tunnel existed here, dozens of versions of it, hundreds maybe, all overlapping, all occupied by trucks that were his truck, all driven by men who were him. A figure approached through the dimensional confusion. It looked like Martin but older, grayer, wearing the same uniform but weathered by years of wear. "You found the maintenance corridor," the older Martin said. "Most versions don't. Most just keep looping until they become part of the background, until they fade into the echoes. What is this place?" "The Lehigh Tunnel exists in multiple states simultaneously," the older Martin explained. "Most of the time, you pass through the normal state, the one that's part of regular I-476. But sometimes, on certain nights, under certain conditions, you slip into one of the other states. The loop states. The maintenance corridors. The in-between places that exist because the tunnel was built wrong." Built wrong how? The engineers didn't account for the convergence. 3 ley lines intersect under this mountain, and when they bored the tunnel, they cut through all 3. It created a weak point in reality, a place where multiple timelines, multiple versions of events can exist simultaneously. Martin's head spun. "How do I get back to the real tunnel? How do I get out?" The older Martin pointed into the dimensional confusion, where hundreds of tunnel versions spiraled in directions that defied geometry. "You have to find the right one. Your original timeline, your original entry point. It's there somewhere, but it looks identical to all the others. How am I supposed to find it? You have to remember something unique about your journey, something that marked your specific timeline as distinct. A detail, a moment, something that happened only in your version of tonight." Martin thought frantically. What had been unique about tonight? Nothing. It had been a routine run, a Halloween night like any other traffic light, whether normal, nothing memorable. Wait, the CB transmission. Before he'd entered the tunnel the first time, he'd heard that voice, that distress call. That had happened before the loop started in his original timeline. "I heard a CB transmission," Martin said. "Someone stuck in a loop, calling for help, before I entered the tunnel the first time." The older Martin smiled grimly. "That's good. That's specific. Find the version of the tunnel where that transmission is still in the air, been swallowed by the loop yet." Martin moved through the dimensional confusion, passing versions of himself trapped in various states of the loop. Some were panicking, some had given up, some had been there so long they'd become translucent, fading into the background noise of reality. He listened to CB radios across the dimensional spectrum, hearing hundreds of distress calls, all slightly different. Finally, he heard it. The transmission as he'd originally heard it, distant and distorted, crackling through static. Stuck in the loop, he can't find the exit, driving for hours. That voice had been him, Martin realized. A version of himself already trapped, calling out to warn others. And by hearing it, by responding to it, he'd become trapped too. But now he knew which tunnel was his. He ran toward it, felt the dimensions solidify around him, felt the overwhelming wrongness of the maintenance corridor give way to normal three-dimensional space. He was back in his truck, inside the tunnel, white tiles and overhead lights in the curve. He kept driving, watching the exit approach, praying that this time would be different. He emerged into darkness. Mile marker 87. Clock 2:04 a.m. Fuel gauge just under 3/4. Traffic appeared on the highway, real traffic, solid trucks passing in the opposite direction. His GPS showed his correct position on I-476 North. Martin pulled over, his whole body shaking, and sobbed with relief. He'd escaped. He found his timeline, his version of reality, and escaped the loop. The CB crackled. Stuck in the loop, can't find the exit, driving for hours. His own voice, calling from the loop he just escaped, warning others. And somewhere, a version of himself was hearing that warning for the first time, was about to enter the Lehigh Tunnel and discover that some tunnels don't just pass through mountains but through the fabric of reality itself. Martin drove on to Scranton, delivered his load, and returned to Philadelphia. He filed no reports, told no one what had happened. Who would believe him? But he changed his route after that. Started taking I-81 north instead of I-476, adding 40 minutes to his drive time, cutting into his profit margin. When dispatchers asked why, he cited construction delays, traffic concerns, anything except the truth. Because the truth was that the Lehigh Tunnel wasn't safe, had never been safe, existed in a state of quantum uncertainty where hundreds of timelines overlapped and trapped unwary travelers in endless loops. And somewhere in that dimensional confusion, versions of Hendricks were still driving, still searching for the exit, still calling out warnings that would trap other versions of themselves in an endless cycle. On Halloween nights, Martin stays home now. Doesn't matter how much the overtime pay tempts him. He sits in his house, doors locked, and tries not to think about the Lehigh Tunnel and the maintenance corridors between realities where hundreds of himself still drive through white tiles and overhead lights, searching for mile marker 87 and finding only mile marker 74, over and over forever. Story 8. The passenger who paid in advance. Sarah Chen had been driving for a small, independent freight company in Montana for 4 years when she made the mistake of picking up a hitchhiker on Highway 2, just west of Cut Bank, on January 17, 2021. Company policy strictly prohibited picking up hitchhikers, but the temperature that night had dropped to -18 degrees, the kind of cold that kills. And the figure standing on the shoulder in the headlights looked small and desperate, and entirely too human to leave behind. Sarah was hauling agricultural equipment from Great Falls to Kalispell, running empty back roads to avoid winter closures on the interstate. Highway 2 cuts through some of the most isolated territory in Montana, places where you can drive for 30 miles without seeing a building, where cell phone service is theoretical, and where winter cold can turn deadly in minutes. The hitchhiker stood illuminated in her headlights at 11:34 p.m., wearing what looked like a thin jacket entirely inadequate for the cold. As Sarah slowed her Volvo VNL, preparing to pass, the figure raised a hand, not frantically waving but simply raising it in a gesture that seemed more like acknowledgement than plea. Against every rule and instinct, Sarah stopped. The hitchhiker approached the passenger side and climbed up when Sarah unlocked the door. The dome light revealed a young man, maybe 25, with dark hair and pale skin and eyes that seemed slightly wrong, slightly too reflective, like an animal's eyes caught in flashlight beam. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I need to get to Kalispell." "That's where I'm heading," Sarah replied, already regretting her decision. "But I have to tell you, company policy says I can't do this. If my dispatcher finds out," "She won't," the hitchhiker interrupted. "I'll make sure of it." Something about the certainty in his voice made Sarah's skin prickle. "What's your name? You can call me Thomas." "What were you doing out here, Thomas? It's 18 below, frozen to death." Thomas smiled, and his teeth seemed too white, too perfect. "I was waiting for you, Sarah." She hadn't told him her name. Sarah's hand moved toward the door handle, fight or flight instinct screaming that she'd made a terrible mistake, that she needed to get out of this truck immediately. "Don't," Thomas said, his voice still quiet but carrying a weight that froze her in place. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to pay a debt." "What debt?" 23 years ago, you hit a patch of black ice on this exact stretch of highway. Your car went into a spin. You should have hit a bridge abutment at 60 miles per hour. You should have died instantly. Do you remember?" Sarah did remember. She'd been 17, driving home from a friend's house, and the car had spun across both lanes. She declosed her eyes, certain she was about to die, and then somehow the car had straightened out, had found traction that shouldn't have been possible on pure ice, and had come to a gentle stop on the shoulder. "That was you." "Not directly," Thomas said, "but I was there. I'm always there at those moments, the ones where the universe balances on an edge. I nudged your car's trajectory by a few degrees, gave you the friction you needed, kept you alive." "Why?" "Because you were supposed to live. Because your death at 17 would have created ripples that weren't supposed to happen. Because intervention was necessary to maintain the proper flow of events." Sarah's hand remained on the door handle. "What are you?" "I'm a corrector," Thomas said. "I fix timeline deviations. I prevent deaths that aren't supposed to happen and facilitate ones that are. I exist in the spaces between cause and effect, making sure reality follows its proper course." "That's insane." "Yes," Thomas agreed. "From your perspective, it would seem so, but insanity is often just truth seen from the wrong angle." Sarah forced herself to breathe normally. "Okay, let's say I believe you. What's this about a debt?" "Every intervention creates an obligation," Thomas explained. "I saved your life, which means you owe reality a debt. That debt needs to be paid, and tonight is the payment date." "You're going to kill me." "No, if I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. The payment isn't your life, it's your choice." Thomas reached into his thin jacket and pulled out a smartphone, its screen glowing with impossible brightness in the dark cab. He showed Sarah a photograph. A woman, maybe 40 years old, standing next to a car on a snowy highway shoulder, changing a tire. "In approximately 47 minutes, Thomas said, this woman, Amanda Priest, will finish changing her tire on Highway 2, about 12 miles west of here. She'll get back in her car and continue driving to Cal. In 53 minutes, a drunk driver in a pickup truck will cross the center line and hit her head-on. She'll die instantly. Her 2 children, sleeping in the backseat, will survive with minor injuries and grow up without their mother." Sarah stared at the photograph. "What does this have to do with me?" "You're going to prevent it," Thomas said. "When we encounter Amanda on the roadside, you're going to stop and help her. You're going to delay her by 6 minutes. That's all it takes. 6 minutes and she'll be past the intersection when the drunk driver crosses the line. He'll hit a snowbank instead of her car. He'll get arrested for DUI, spend a year in jail, and emerge sober. Amanda will go home to her children. Reality will flow as it's supposed to. Then why don't you do it? Why do you need me?" "Because intervention has costs," Thomas said. "I can nudge, can make small adjustments, but direct action creates distortions. You, however, are human. Your choices are your own. If you choose to stop and help Amanda, reality accepts it as natural. The timeline remains stable. And if I do," Thomas's reflective eyes fixed on her, "then Amanda dies, her children grow up damaged. One of them becomes a mass shooter 20 years from now, kills 14 people in a school, and creates ripples that cascade through decades. All because you chose not to stop for 6 minutes." Sarah felt the weight of the choice crushing down on her chest. "That's not fair." "You can't put that on me." "Life isn't fair," Thomas said simply, "but debts must be paid. You lived because I intervened. Now you must intervene for someone else. That's how the balance works." They drove in silence for several minutes. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, looking for some escape, some alternative, but she kept coming back to the simple arithmetic. 6 minutes of her time versus Amanda's life versus 14 victims 20 years from now. "What if I just don't believe you?" Sarah said. "What if I think you're just crazy and I drop you off at the next town and forget this happened? Then you'll see Amanda on the roadside and you'll drive past, and 53 minutes later you'll hear about the fatal accident on Highway 2. And for the rest of your life, you'll wonder if I was telling the truth. And 20 years from now, you'll see the news about a school shooting, and you'll wonder if that was the consequence. The doubt will eat at you until the day you die." Sarah gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. "I hate you." "I know," Thomas said quietly. "Most people do once they understand what I am, but hate doesn't change the choice you have to make." Ahead in the headlights, a car appeared on the shoulder, hazard lights flashing. A woman was crouched by the rear tire, working with a jack. Amanda. Sarah's foot hovered over the brake pedal. Every instinct told her to keep driving, to refuse to play this game, to reject the manipulation and the impossible burden that Thomas had placed on her. But she thought about her own spin on black ice 23 years ago, about the impossible traction that had saved her life, about the intervention that had let her live to this moment. She pulled over behind Amanda's car. 6 minutes, Thomas said. "That's all it takes." Sarah climbed down from her cab and approached the woman struggling with the tire. Amanda looked up, relief flooding her face. "Thank God," Amanda said. "I can't get the lug nuts loose. They're frozen." Sarah helped her, using the better leverage of 2 people and the tire iron from her own truck. They worked together in the bitter cold, breath fogging, hands going numb despite gloves. They talked about the weather, about the drive, about Amanda's kids asleep in the car who she was trying not to wake. It took 7 minutes to change the tire. When they finished, Amanda thanked her profusely, tried to offer money that Sarah refused, and drove away into the night, taillights disappearing westward. Sarah climbed back into her truck. Thomas was gone. No trace of him remained. The passenger seat was empty, the door locked from the inside, and when Sarah checked her truck's internal camera system later, it showed no footage of anyone climbing in or out. She drove on to Kalispell, delivered her load, and returned to Great Falls. She didn't mention the hitchhiker, didn't file any report, tried to convince herself it had been a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and isolation. But 3 days later, the local news reported a DUI arrest on Highway 2, a drunk driver who'd crossed the center line and hit a snowbank, arrested and charged, no injuries. And Sarah knew that somewhere in a timeline she couldn't see, Amanda Priest had made it home safely to her children. 4 years have passed since that night. Sarah still drives for the same company, still runs Highway 2 when routes require it, and she's never seen Thomas again. But sometimes, late at night on empty roads, she sees hitchhikers and wonders if they're real or if they're correctors waiting to collect debts, waiting to offer impossible choices to drivers who once benefited from unlikely interventions. She stops for hitchhikers more often now, despite company policy, despite the risks, because she understands something she didn't before. We're all connected by debts and interventions we can't see, by moments where someone or something nudged reality to keep us. And sometimes the payment comes due in ways we don't expect. Last month, she helped a stranded motorist change a battery in sub-zero weather, delaying her route by 15 minutes. She doesn't know if it mattered, doesn't know if those 15 minutes prevented something terrible, or if they were just 15 minutes of ordinary human kindness. But she remembers Thomas's reflective eyes and his quiet voice explaining that interventions have costs, that debts must be paid, and that sometimes the weight of other people's futures rests on simple choices we make in the dark. She carries a photograph in her wallet now, printed from a news article. Amanda Priest and her 2 children at a high school graduation, all 3 smiling, alive and together 4 years after the night they should have been torn apart. Sarah doesn't know for certain that her 6 minutes made the difference. But she knows that sometimes faith isn't about certainty. It's about choosing to believe that small acts of kindness ripple forward in ways we can't predict, that debts paid create balances we can't see, and that the universe sometimes asks us to intervene in moments that matter more than we can possibly understand. Story 9. The Way Station That Measured Souls. Frank Morrison had been an independent owner-operator for 31 years, hauling everything from furniture to heavy equipment across the western United States in his blue Kenworth T680. He'd been through every way station from California to Montana, knew them all by reputation and procedure, and had never received a violation in 3 decades of driving. On March 9, 2023, at a way station on I-90 westbound in Idaho, Frank learned that some scales measure things other than weight. He'd left Billings, Montana at 6 a.m., hauling a load of industrial machinery to Spokane, Washington. The route was familiar, boring in its predictability, and Frank drove it with the mechanical efficiency of someone who'd done the same thing hundreds of times. Around 2 p.m., crossing into Idaho, he saw the way station ahead, its signs commanding all commercial vehicles to enter. Frank checked his paperwork, confirmed his weight was legal at 78,000 pounds, and pulled onto the scale. The procedure should have been simple: stop on the scale, wait for the green light, proceed when cleared. But as Frank's truck settled onto the platform, the digital display showed something impossible. Weight: 78,000 pounds. Souls: 4. Frank stared at the souls. That couldn't be right. That didn't make sense. Way stations measured pounds, sometimes kilograms, but never souls. A voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "Blue Kenworth, proceed to the inspection bay." Frank's stomach tightened. He'd been pulled for secondary inspection before, random checks that were annoying but routine. But something about this felt different, wrong, and that impossible reading on the scale made his skin crawl. He pulled forward to the inspection bay, where a uniformed officer waited. The officer looked normal, middle-aged professional, wearing the standard Idaho State Police uniform. But his eyes seemed distant, unfocused, as if he were looking through Frank rather than at him. "License and registration," the officer said. Frank handed over his documents, his hands steady despite the growing unease in his chest. The officer examined them, then looked up. "Mr. Morrison, are you aware that you're carrying unauthorized passengers?" "No, sir, I'm alone in the cab, no passengers." "The scale indicates 4 souls aboard your vehicle," the officer said, his voice flat and clinical. "Regulations require all souls to be properly documented and manifested. You're currently in violation." Frank's mouth went dry. "I don't understand. Souls, what does that mean?" The officer gestured toward the back of Frank's truck. "Your cargo contains 4 human souls, Mr. Morrison. They need to be declared on your bill of lading." "That's impossible. I'm hauling industrial machinery. Conveyor parts, motor assemblies, nothing alive." "Souls aren't always alive, sir. Please step out of your vehicle and accompany me to the cargo inspection area." Frank climbed down from his cab on legs that felt unstable. This had to be some kind of bizarre joke, a prank played on long-haul drivers. But the officer's expression remained deadly serious as he led Frank to the rear of the trailer. "Open it," the officer commanded. Frank unlocked the trailer doors and swung them open. Inside, secured with straps and protective padding, sat his cargo, industrial machinery exactly as specified on his bill of lading. Nothing unusual, nothing alive, nothing that could possibly justify the officer's claims. "I don't see anything wrong," Frank said. "It's just machinery." The officer pulled out a device that looked like a combination of a Geiger counter and a smartphone, holding it up toward the cargo. The screen glowed with an eerie blue light, and numbers scrolled past too quickly to read. 4 confirmed presences, the officer said, bound to the machinery, Class 3 attachments probably from the manufacturing facility. Felt reality tilting sideways. You're telling me there are ghosts in my cargo. Souls, Mr. Morrison, not ghosts. There's a distinction. These are residual human presences bound to objects through trauma or significance. The machinery you're carrying was manufactured at a facility in Kentucky, where 4 workers died in an industrial accident in 1987. Their souls attached to the equipment they were working on when they died, and they've remained bound to it ever since. This is insane. Yes, sir, it probably seems that way. But federal regulations require all soul transport to be properly documented. You're in violation of 49 CFR Section 417.9, unauthorized transport of incorporeal passengers. Frank's mind raced. I didn't know. How could I have known? They're not visible, they're not physical, they're just attached to machinery. The officer nodded sympathetically. I understand, sir, and that's why this will be recorded as a warning rather than a citation. But you need to understand the risks. Souls in transit can become unstable, especially if they're unaware they're being moved. They can cause mechanical failures, electrical problems, even influence the driver's mental state. We've had accidents caused by unmanifested soul transport. What am I supposed to do? The officer pulled out a form, began filling it out with a pen that looked normal but wrote in ink that shimmered with that same eerie blue light. I'm documenting the 4 souls on your manifest. When you reach your delivery destination, you'll need to have them properly transferred or released. There's a soul management specialist in Spokane, Dr. Elizabeth Vargas. She can handle the transfer. He handed Frank a business card that felt too cold, as if it had been stored in a freezer. The card read, Dr. Elizabeth Vargas, Incorporeal Attachment Specialist, with a Spokane address and phone number. Transfer them to what? Frank asked. That depends on the souls. Some want to move on, to finally let go of the trauma that bound them. Others want to remain attached to the physical world. Dr. Vargas will communicate with them, determine their wishes, and facilitate the appropriate resolution. The officer finished the paperwork and handed Frank a copy. You're cleared to proceed, Mr. Morrison. Drive safely, and please be aware that the souls may manifest during your journey. If you hear voices, see anomalies, or experience unusual phenomena, remain calm and maintain focus on the road. Frank took the paperwork with numb hands and climbed back into his truck. Waved him forward, and Frank pulled out of the way station, his mind reeling. For the next hour, he drove in silence, trying to process what had just happened. Souls, ghosts, incorporeal passengers. None of it made sense. None of it fit with the rational world he'd operated in for 31 years. Then the radio turned on by itself. Frank had shut it off before the way station, but now it crackled to life, cycling through stations too fast for any mechanical failure, voices bleeding through the static in fragments. Help us. Want to go home. Died in the machine. So cold here. Frank's hands tightened on the wheel. Hello, can you hear me? The radio settled on an empty frequency, pure static, but through it came a voice, clearer than the others. We didn't know we were dead. We've been in the machines for 36 years and we didn't know. I'm taking you to Spokane, Frank said, feeling absurd talking to his radio but unable to stop himself. There's someone there who can help you, Dr. Vargas. We want to go home, the voice said, and Frank heard the desperation in it, the decades of confusion and fear. We have families. We had families. Do they remember us? Frank pulled over at a rest area, unable to drive and process this simultaneously. He grabbed his phone and searched for the industrial accident the officer had mentioned. Kentucky, 1987, 4 workers. He found it. A news article from the Lexington Herald-Leader, dated April 3, 1987. 4 die in industrial accident at Morrison Machine Works. The article detailed an electrical failure that had killed 4 workers during a late-night shift. Robert Chen, age 27, Maria Gonzalez, age 33, James Patterson, age 41, and Dennis Wu, age 24. Frank stared at their names, these people who died before he'd even started his trucking career, who'd been bound to machinery for 36 years without knowing they were dead. "I'll make sure you get help," Frank promised the empty air of his cab. "I'll take you to Dr. Vargas, and she'll help you find your families or whatever it is you need." The radio crackled with what might have been gratitude. Frank drove on to Spokane, made his delivery to the warehouse, and then drove to the address on Dr. Vargas's card. It led to a small office in a strip mall, sandwiched between a tax preparation service and a yoga studio. Dr. Vargas was a woman in her 60s, wearing professional attire and an expression of deep compassion. She listened to Frank's story without interruption, examined the paperwork from the weigh station, and nodded as if this were the most normal thing in the world. "I can help them," she said. "It will take a few hours. The machinery will need to remain here while I perform the release ritual. What will happen to them? That's up to them. Some souls move on immediately, crossing to whatever lies beyond. Others linger, wanting to contact families or resolve unfinished business. I facilitate communication, provide closure, help them understand they have choices." Frank waited while Dr. Vargas worked, sitting in the small office lobby, drinking terrible coffee and trying to reconcile his rational worldview with the reality of soul transport and incorporeal attachments. 4 hours later, Dr. Vargas emerged, looking exhausted but satisfied. "It's done," she said. Robert and Maria chose to move on. They felt their families had grieved and healed, and they were ready to let go. James wanted to visit his daughter one more time. "I've arranged for a medium in Louisville to facilitate contact." Dennis chose to remain. He's attached to the machinery by choice now, says he wants to see where it goes, what it builds. He's at peace with it. "So there's still one soul in my cargo." "Yes, but consensually bound. That's legal under federal regulations." Dennis is documented now, aware of his state and traveling voluntarily. Frank drove back to the warehouse, retrieved his machinery with its single remaining soul passenger, and headed back to Montana. The radio stayed quiet, but occasionally Frank felt a presence in the cab, companionable rather than frightening, the sense of someone riding along by choice. He never saw another weigh station measure souls. Either it had been a one-time anomaly, or the Idaho station on I-90 westbound was the only one equipped to detect incorporeal passengers. Frank never asked, never investigated, simply accepted it as one of the mysteries of a life on the road. But he started paying more attention to his cargo after that, especially when hauling used equipment or machinery from old facilities. He learned to recognize the signs of soul attachment: radios that turned on by themselves, tools that moved when nobody touched them, the sense of being watched from empty spaces. And when he detected those signs, he made sure to stop at that Idaho weigh station, made sure Dennis's presence was properly documented, made sure Dr. Vargas got called when souls needed help transitioning. Because Frank learned something important on that March day. The world is stranger than we imagine. Death doesn't always mean departure. Sometimes truckers carry more than cargo. Sometimes they carry the lost, the confused, the souls bound by trauma to the physical world, all of them looking for someone to finally see them, acknowledge them, and help them find their way home. Dennis still rides with Frank sometimes, a voluntary passenger attached to various machinery Frank hauls. They don't talk much, but the radio occasionally plays songs from 1987, and Frank knows it's Dennis's way of saying he's there, that he's okay, that being dead and bound to machinery isn't as lonely when someone knows you exist and treats you with dignity. Frank's retirement is approaching now. 33 years on the road, countless miles, countless loads. And when younger drivers ask his advice, he tells them the practical things. Maintain your equipment, log your hours, watch your weight. But to the ones who seem ready to hear it, the ones who have seen things they can't explain, he adds one more piece of wisdom. Some cargo weighs more than pounds. Some way stations measure things you can't see, and if you ever see a scale reading souls, don't panic. Just document it properly, treat your passengers with respect, and remember that everyone deserves help finding their way home, even the ones who have been dead for decades. Story 10. The Delivery to Nowhere. Vincent Torres had been driving for FedEx Ground for 14 years, running the same regional route through rural Oregon 5 days a week. The job was monotonous but stable, and Vincent appreciated the predictability after years of chaotic long-haul work. On November 19, 2022, he received a delivery instruction that would lead him to a location that shouldn't exist and a package that contained something impossible. The instruction came through his scanner at 9:47 a.m. Priority delivery, 1447 Blackwood Lane, must deliver by 6 p.m. today. Signature required, no safe drop authorized. Vincent checked his GPS for the address and frowned. Blackwood Lane wasn't in his database, and his GPS couldn't locate it. He called dispatch. "I've got a delivery to 1447 Blackwood Lane, but I can't find the street. Can you verify the address?" The dispatcher typed for a moment. "Address is confirmed. Blackwood Lane, approximately 15 miles northeast of your current location. Customer paid premium for guaranteed delivery today. My GPS doesn't show it. Use paper maps. The road's been there since the 1960s, probably just not updated in the digital database." Vincent pulled out his Oregon Road Atlas, a kept for exactly these situations. He flipped through the pages, found the county, and scanned for Blackwood Lane. It wasn't there, but the delivery had to be made. Premium customers paid extra for guaranteed service, and FedEx didn't accept excuses. Vincent decided to drive northeast and ask locals for directions. He drove into increasingly rural territory, the houses growing farther apart, the paved roads giving way to gravel. At a small general store, he stopped and asked the elderly clerk about Blackwood Lane. The clerk's expression changed, becoming guarded. "You don't want to go there. I have a delivery. Do you know where it is?" "I know where it is, but nobody lives there. Nobody has lived there for 40 years. The package is addressed to 1447 Blackwood Lane. Someone must be there to receive it." The clerk studied him for a long moment, then sighed and pulled out a hand-drawn map, sketching directions on the back of a receipt. "Follow County Road 47 for 8 miles. You'll see an unmarked dirt road on the left. No sign, but you'll know it because the trees grow wrong there, bent away from the road like they're trying to avoid it. Follow that dirt road for 2 miles. You'll find Blackwood Lane." "What do you mean the trees grow wrong?" "You'll see. And when you make your delivery, don't stay. Don't accept any hospitality. Don't enter any buildings. Just get the signature and leave." Vincent took the hand-drawn map, thanked the clerk, and drove on, unease growing in his chest. County Road 47 was poorly maintained, gravel and potholes, and when he found the unmarked dirt road, he understood what the clerk meant about the trees. They bent away from the road, their trunks curving unnaturally as if some force were pushing them back. The effect was eerie, like driving through a corridor where nature itself was recoiling. 2 miles of bumpy dirt road later, a street sign appeared. Blackwood Lane. It was old, rusted, the kind of sign that hadn't been replaced since it was first installed decades ago. Vincent turned onto Blackwood Lane and immediately felt wrong. The air seemed heavier, the light dimmer despite the clear afternoon sky. The road was paved but cracked, weeds growing through the asphalt, and the houses he passed were abandoned, windows broken, roofs collapsed. 1447 Blackwood Lane stood at the end of the road, a 2-story Victorian house that looked impossibly well-maintained compared to its neighbors. Fresh paint, intact windows, a lawn that was neatly trimmed. Light glowed from the windows, warm and inviting. Vincent pulled his delivery van into the driveway, grabbed the package, and walked to the front door. Package was light, maybe 2 pounds, addressed to the resident at 1447 Blackwood Lane. He rang the doorbell. Chimes echoed inside the house, melodic and old-fashioned. The door opened and a woman stood there, maybe 60 years old, wearing a dress that looked like it came from the 1950s. Her smile was warm, genuine. "Oh, wonderful, my package arrived," she said. "I've been waiting so long." Vincent consulted his scanner. "I need a signature for delivery." "Of course, dear, come in while I find my glasses." Vincent remembered the clerk's warning, "Don't enter any buildings." "I can wait here, ma'am." "Nonsense, it's cold out. Please come in for just a moment." It wasn't particularly cold, maybe 55 degrees, but Vincent found himself stepping through the doorway before he consciously decided to do so, as if the house itself had pulled him inside. The interior looked like a perfectly preserved 1950s home. Floral wallpaper, vintage furniture, a rotary phone on a side table, a television with rabbit ear antennae. But everything was too perfect, too clean, as if it were a museum display rather than a lived-in space. The woman found her glasses on a sideboard and turned to sign the scanner. As she did, Vincent noticed something odd. The package he'd carried in, the one addressed to the resident, had changed. The label now read different text, from Vincent Tours to the resident, 1447 Blackwood Lane. Contents, memory. What the hell? Vincent muttered, staring at the label that definitely hadn't said that when he'd loaded it in his van. The woman smiled sadly. "It's your memory, Vincent, the memory of what happened here. I don't understand. You don't remember, but you will. Look at the package. Really look." Vincent turned the package over in his hands, and as he did, flashes of memory began to surface, memories that couldn't be his but felt absolutely real. He saw himself as a child, maybe 8 years old, playing in a yard, this house. He saw a woman who looked like the woman standing before him but 40 years younger, calling him inside for dinner. He saw a man, tall and kind, teaching him to throw a baseball in the same driveway. "This isn't possible," Vincent said, his voice shaking. "I grew up in Portland. I never lived here." "You grew up here until you were 8, the woman said gently. "Then there was an accident. A gas leak, they said, though it was never quite clear. The house burned. Your parents died. You survived barely and went to live with your aunt in Portland." No, my parents died in a car accident when I was a baby. I never knew them." "That's what your aunt told you. She thought it would be easier, thought the truth would be too traumatic for a child who'd already lost everything. So she created a new history for you, and eventually you believed it." Vincent felt the package growing heavier in his hands, as if it were filling with substance, with weight, with 40 years of suppressed memory. "This house burned down," he said. "The clerk in town said nobody else lived here for 40 years. That's correct. Nobody has, nobody alive. But we've been waiting, your father and I, waiting for you to come back, waiting for you to remember. You're dead." "Yes, dear, we died in 1982. But love doesn't end with death. And we couldn't move on until we'd said goodbye properly, until you'd remembered us." Vincent's legs gave out, and he sat heavily on a vintage sofa that felt solid and real. His hands trembled as he opened the package, tearing away the cardboard. Inside was a photograph, himself as a child, standing between 2 smiling adults in front of this house. His parents. Their faces triggered an avalanche of memories, breaking through 40 years of constructed amnesia. He remembered his mother's voice singing him to sleep, his father's laugh when Vincent caught his first fish, the smell of his mother's cooking, the safety of being held when nightmares woke him. And he remembered the night of the fire, the smoke, his father carrying him out of the burning house, going back for his mother and never emerging, the flames consuming everything. "I'm sorry," Vincent sobbed. "I'm sorry I forgot you." His mother knelt before him, and though her hand felt cold when it touched his face, it felt real. "You were a child. You survived the only way you could, by forgetting. Your aunt did what she thought was best. We don't blame you, Vincent. We never blamed you. Why now? Why after 40 years? Because you're ready. Because your own daughter is 8 years old now, the same age you were, and becoming a parent has opened doors in your mind that have been locked for decades. You needed to remember, needed to know that you were loved, that your parents died trying to save you, that their last thoughts were of keeping you safe. Vincent looked around the house, this impossible preservation of a life that ended in flames. Is my father here? He's waiting in the backyard where you used to play catch. He wanted you to have time with me first. Vincent walked through the house, each room triggering more memories, filling the gaps in his history that he'd never known existed. In the kitchen, he remembered his mother teaching him to make pancakes. In the living room, he remembered family movie nights, sitting between his parents on the same sofa. In the backyard, his father stood holding a baseball, looking exactly as Vincent remembered him from those recovered memories. They played catch in silence for a while, the ball traveling between them across 40 years of separation. I wish I'd remembered sooner, Vincent said finally. You remembered exactly when you needed to, his father replied. You built a good life, Vincent. Your aunt loved you, raised you well. You became a good man, a good father. We've been watching and we're proud of you. What happens now? Now we say goodbye properly. Now you take your memories with you, keep them, cherish them, and share them with your daughter. Tell her about her grandparents, show her the photograph. And we can finally move on knowing that we're not forgotten, that our love survived even death and amnesia. Vincent stayed until sunset, talking with his parents, remembering his early childhood, filling in the blank spaces of his history. As the light faded, the house began to fade too, becoming translucent, insubstantial. It's time, his mother said. The house only exists as long as it's needed. You've remembered, you've said goodbye, and now it can finally finish burning. Vincent hugged them both, feeling their forms growing less solid, more ephemeral. I love you, I'll never forget again. We love you too, Vincent, forever. He walked to his van, the photograph and the package tucked under his arm. When he looked back, the house was engulfed in flames, but they were gentle flames, cleansing rather than destructive. And through them, he could see his parents standing together, waving goodbye, finally free to move on. By the time he reached the main road, the house was gone, returned to the burned ruin it had been for 40 years. But the photograph remained real and solid in his hands, proof that his memories weren't fabrication, that his parents had existed, had loved him, had died trying to save him. Vincent called his wife that night and told her everything. She didn't believe him at first, thought the stress of the job had caused some kind of episode, until he showed her the photograph. She saw his face and recognized that whatever had happened, it had fundamentally changed him. He contacted his aunt, now in her 80s, and asked her about his parents. She wept and confirmed the truth. The fire, the deaths, the decision to tell him his parents had died when he was a baby because the trauma of might have broken him. Vincent forgave her. She'd done what she thought was best, had loved him and raised him well. But he also reclaimed his history, filled in the missing years, and told his daughter about her grandparents who died 40 years before she was born but had loved her across that divide, had waited decades to make sure their son remembered them. The photograph sits on his mantle now, a family reunited across the boundary of death. And sometimes, late at night, Vincent smells his mother's cooking or hears his father's laugh, gentle reminders that persists. That memory can be recovered, and that sometimes packages contain things more precious than we can imagine. The gift of a past we'd lost, delivered by the universe to an address that exists only when it's needed, on a road that appears only to guide the forgotten home.